Imagine this. A product made in a city takes a 4,000-kilometer trip crossing the sea and the jungle just to travel all the way back and get sold right where it was made. Sounds crazy, right? Well, welcome to the world's dumbest supply chain, created because of a tax benefit handed to a city in the middle of the Amazon jungle. Now, before I explain this insanity to you, get ready because I bet your jaw's gonna drop when you see how far human stupidity can go. So first, I'm gonna explain to you how this crazy route works, showing it on the map and all, and then I will tell you how this genius idea came up, as well as about its consequences. And by the end of this video, I hope you all can see how the state, most of the time, ends up creating the wrong incentives and making people do totally senseless stuff. Now, to kick off our journey, let's head to São Paulo, the biggest city in Brazil. São Paulo is also the country's industrial powerhouse and its top consumer market. Now, picture that you've got a motorcycle factory, something like Honda. Down in São Paulo, you are making all the bike parts, the engine, the wheels, the whole deal. And it's also in São Paulo, or the nearby states, where you sell most of your bikes. But okay, let's say you've got all the final pieces right there in front of you. Time to put that motorcycle together and sell it, right? Nope. Even though you've got everything ready to go, you can't just assemble the bike there. Why? Because if you do so, that bike will be officially considered as made in São Paulo. And trust me, you don't want that. That would be a massive mistake, as you will soon understand. So instead of finishing the job right there, you decide to do something way more logical and practical. You ship it all on a 4,000-kilometer trip to the Amazon jungle. Yes, so you throw your motorcycle parts onto a truck and hit the road for about 70 kilometers, full of traffic jams, until you finally arrive in the port of Santos, the biggest in Latin America. There you load your bike parts onto a cargo ship and wave them goodbye. Your motorcycle pieces then kick off an epic continental journey, passing along the entire Brazilian coastline, all the way up to the mouth of the Amazon River. And here's where we encounter our first logistical problem. You see, since the ships from Santos are usually built for the sea, the cargo often needs to switch ships, which can take days. Plus, you might just get unlucky and hit a drought along the way, blocking your path and delaying your trip even more. Anyway, once the cargo switches boats, it heads up through the Amazon River until it reaches Manaus, in the heart of the Amazon jungle, where the motorcycle parts finally get assembled together and the bike's officially finished. Once that's done, the motorcycle can claim it was made in the Manaus Economic Zone, which, as we'll see, is something of the uttermost importance. Now, once the bike is put together, it goes back on the boat for another 4,000-kilometer journey back to the port of Santos. From there, it climbs the mountains up to São Paulo and finally gets sold, probably right there in the city, very close to where it all started. Now, I'm not making this up. The question is, why isn't the motorcycle just finished up in São Paulo, since that's where it's gonna be sold anyway? Why the hell do people send everything out to the jungle? But people and companies do that because if you produce, or at least finish producing, your motorcycle in Manaus, you will pay much less in taxes, even down to zero in some cases. So there, your tax burden drops a lot. On the other hand, the extra logistical costs of this continental journey end up increasing the product's price by about 20 to 30%, partially wiping out those tax benefits. The thing is that Brazilian taxes are so high that even so, it's still worth it for companies to go through all this hassle. After all, if it were made outside Manaus, the motorcycle in our case could face a tax burden of up to 50%. Now, the most ironic part is that the Manaus Economic Zone was supposed to make things cheaper by producing them in Brazil and with almost no taxes, right? The thing is that this economic zone is so inefficient that products made there end up costing more than things made abroad. Brazilians only buy from the Manaus Economic Zone because importing stuff comes with a crazy tax of 60%. So we Brazilians are pretty much stuck with the local products. But okay, if the idea was to create a free trade zone, why on earth did they put it in the middle of the Amazon jungle? So that's what I'm going to tell you about now. You see, even though Manaus is a poor city today, it wasn't always like that. In fact, Manaus used to be incredibly wealthy, thanks to the rubber boom that happened between 1870 and 1910. You see, the Industrial Revolution, the rise of the automotive industry, and the invention of the tire turned rubber into gold, with Brazil as the world's top supplier of this commodity. Back then, Manaus was so rich that it was called the Paris of the tropics, but the party ended with the competition from Southeast Asia. That is, until World War II. With the Japanese occupying Asia, the Allies turned back to the Amazon to get rubber for their tanks and planes. The boom began again, but when the war ended, synthetic rubber and Asia production knocked Brazil out of the game for good. What followed was decline, with Manaus becoming a poor city dotted with relics of its rich past. While all this was happening, the southeast region of Brazil was developing rapidly, sparking a massive exodus of people heading there, especially from the poorer regions of the country, like the northeast and the north, where, by the way, Manaus is located. Decades went by, and then in 1967, during Brazil's military dictatorship, the government decided to try revitalizing the area. If businesses had given up on Manaus, the government was going to save it. You see, back then, Brazil's economy was far more closed off than it is today. On top of that, the country followed, and by the way still follows, a developmentalist economic model, with the government as the main economic player and the primary driver of the nation's development. It wasn't the market, the society calling the shots. Far from it. It was the government. The state was the big capital allocator back then. And honestly, only the government could come up with something as inefficient as the Manaus Economic Zone. But anyway, in 1967, the Brazilian government created this economic zone to develop this abandoned region in the Amazon. The goal was to attract businesses and reduce inequality between the north and the south, slowing down the exodus to the major and southern capitals. Besides, and perhaps most importantly, the Brazilian government wanted to populate the northern part of Brazil more, as a geopolitical goal, in order to better protect the region against, for instance, a potential foreign occupation. And so, the Manaus Economic Zone was born. The funny thing is that this could have worked much better. The government could have created an economic zone on the coast. In Natal, for instance, Natal was used during the Second World War as an American base to cross the Atlantic to get to Africa. It's basically the halfway point between the southern part of Brazil and the US. It is also close to Europe and Africa. My point is, it would have made much more sense to put an economic zone in Natal or anywhere else along the coast. But no, it had to be in the middle of the biggest and most dense forest in the world. Why? Well, why not, right? So that's the Manaus Economic Zone, the dumbest supply chain route in the world. Now, why am I bringing this subject, since my channel is about economics and investing in general? I'm bringing this up to show you how the state, how the government always ends up messing with people's lives and society. If it weren't for the government sticking its hands in to create this economic zone, Brazil's logistics chain would be 1,000 times more efficient, and thus the Brazilian economy would be much healthier. But no, instead of letting the market adjust and businesses choose the best place to operate, the government decided to force development in a remote region only accessible after thousands of kilometers by boat. Actually, the infrastructure in this region is so inadequate that traveling by car or truck would be a shorter route, only about 3,500 kilometers. But take a look at the state of this road. But I'm bringing this subject because, as I've said in the beginning of this video, the Manaus Economic Zone is one of the best examples of how the government forces people and businesses into waste, into doing things that make no sense. It's mind-blowing. If this economic zone hadn't been created, companies would finish their products in São Paulo and have them on the shelves within hours. But no, instead it takes 2 weeks to get there. because an artificial stimulus created by the state makes businesses send everything to the middle of the Amazon jungle first. The creation of the Manaus Economic Zone also ended up causing unnecessary deforestation. And on top of that, it brought another big problem. You see, it's tough for Brazil to lower taxes, because if Brazil started cutting taxes, the competitiveness of the Manaus Economic Zone would take a massive hit, and right now, about 100,000 jobs depend on it. So on the rare occasions when someone suggests cutting taxes, the argument is always the same. We cannot cut taxes, since that would lead to a drop in production at the Manaus Economic Zone, putting a bunch of jobs at risk. And so, that's how Brazil keeps failing to move forward, preferring to be stuck in time. Anyway, this was the dumbest supply chain route in the world, a burden Brazilians will be still carrying for decades to come, until 2074. 2074, I'm not kidding. And deep down, this nightmare only exists for one reason, because of government intervention. It didn't have to be this way, but unfortunately, it is. Anyway, that's it for today, and see you next time.